Hi everyone, welcome to this Temkin Group webinar on the Temkin Experience Ratings 2018. This is Bruce Temkin, CX Transformist and Managing Partner of Temkin Group. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited about this annual webinar because it's our opportunity to talk about a very interesting and I think important part of research that Temkin Group publishes every year, and that's our Temkin Ratings series. What I'm going to talk about today is give you an overview of Temkin Ratings, really focusing on the Temkin Experience Ratings, which is one of many of the ratings that we publish. So I thought I'd start with answering what is a basic question: what is Temkin Ratings? And while I'm answering this question, I'll let you know that you can submit questions in the chat box. But at the end of this presentation, I've actually put together a number of questions that people generally have about the Temkin Ratings and the Temkin Experience Ratings, and hopefully that will answer a lot of your bubbled up issues and questions. Let's start. What is Temkin Ratings? It's a set of consumer-based ratings of large organizations. Why is it large organizations? It turns out that our methodology, which is based on large-scale online consumer surveys, really works well in picking up information about brands that have a fairly large national footprint. Our requirement is that we have at least 100 respondents, so you can imagine that smaller brands or brands that have just regional coverage, we wouldn't be able to pick up enough responses to be able to actually publish results. And when it comes to the survey, we set quotas to closely match the U.S. Census. What does that mean? When we get, and our survey is based on 10,000 U.S. consumers, so we make sure that the respondents as a group have the same look in terms of gender, age, income, ethnicity, and region in the U.S., so that the answers that those groups of respondents give is very similar to what you would expect if you were able to actually go out and survey everyone in the U.S. We publish different Temkin ratings. This year we're publishing the Temkin Experience Ratings, the Temkin Trust Ratings, and the Temkin Forgiveness Ratings. And it's the 8th year we've been publishing this. We've been publishing it since 2011. And I'll show you later some of the resources, but you can always go find out more at temkinratings.com. So simply type in temkinratings.com and you'll get a bunch of information. Let's talk specifically about what this webinar is about, and that is the Temkin Experience Ratings. The way the Temkin Experience Ratings work is we ask consumers to select companies they've interacted with over the previous 60 days. So what we do is we've identified a series of industries. And yes, Temkin Group has identified the industries. We pick the industries that we think are collectively representative of customer experience, a broad set of customer experiences. And then consumers pick from a list in each one of those industries. The companies we put on the list are those that we think are large enough to actually meet our criteria of getting at least 100 respondents across our 10,000 consumer panel. We then ask questions about the 3 components of customer experience. We've published a lot on this, and if you have any questions about what this looks like, I urge you to go to my blog, experiencematters.blog, and you can find out about the success, effort, and emotion, because every interaction that a customer has with your organization, they view it through the lens of these 3 things: success, can they do what they want to do? Effort, how easy or hard is it for them to do what they want? And emotion, how do they feel about that interaction? So what we've done is actually created our index, the Temkin Experience Ratings, based on questions for each one of those 3 areas. And here are the questions. For the success component, we ask the question, thinking of your most recent interaction with each of these companies, to what degree were you able to accomplish what you want to do? And you can see the range, the 7-point scale that we use on that. Now, all 3 of these questions are based on a 7-point scale. For the effort question, we asked, think of your most recent interactions with each of these companies. How easy was it to interact with the company? Then the emotion component is thinking about your most recent interactions with each of these companies. How did you feel about those interactions? And remember, at this point, we're asking those three questions about companies that the consumers have already identified that they've interacted with over the previous six days. And you'll notice that each one of the questions has a separate 7-point scale, but as I mentioned before, they all have 7-point scales. So the way we calculate it, our ratings, is first of all, after we've done that research, we only look at the companies that received feedback from at least 100 consumers. As I mentioned, we pick the companies that we believe are large enough to get 100 consumers, but that doesn't mean we always get 100 responses for all of the companies we pick. So we always end up with a handful of companies that fall below that. So we take those out of the mix. We'll count them for industry averages, but we won't publish individual scores for those companies that have less than 100 pieces of consumer feedback. And then what we do is we develop a rating for each component. So we have a success rating, an effort rating, and emotion rating. Now those ratings are calculated by taking the percentage of consumers who gave a company a 6 or a 7 on each one of those scales and subtracting the percentage of consumers who give the company a 1, 2, or 3. So you can think of it as a net success, net effort, and net emotion scale. Now overall, to calculate the Temkin Experience Ratings, it's actually just the average of those three components. So to make this come to life and make it seem a little bit more real, I've put together a scoring example. So this is just a make-believe company. And if we look at the answers on the success component, 86% of consumers gave it a 6 or a 7, 2% gave it a 1, 2, or 3. So its net success or its success rating is 84%. For effort, 87% gave it a 6 or a 7, 2% went 1, 2, or 3. So its net score, or what we would call its Temkin effort rating, is 85%. Now, when it comes to emotion, the Temkin emotion rating, you can see 75% gave a 6 or a 7, 4% a 1, 2, or 3, and it ends up with a 71% Temkin emotion rating. So we take the Temkin success rating, 84%, the Temkin effort rating, 85%, and the Temkin emotion rating, 71%. We average them together, and this company's Temkin Experience Ratings is 80%. So hopefully that's pretty clear. It's the average of the three underlying ratings. So here are the results. We'll start looking at the results. As I mentioned, we look at a bunch of companies and a bunch of industries. For the last few years, we've been looking at 20 industries. This year, we have 318 companies across 20 industries. And what you're looking at is the range of scores for any given industry. The black dot on the left represents the lowest scoring company in the industry. The diamond on the right represents the highest scoring company in the industry. And the red box in the middle represents the average for that industry. Now, while we have this industry range on the screen, I want to point out a few things. First of all, if you just look at those red squares, right, if you look at those red squares, then you see that most industries are in what I would call the mediocre range, okay to good, with most of them being in okay. A few exceptions, supermarket chains almost make it into the excellent. They're pushing the envelope. And then on the lower end, we see that health plans and TV and internet service providers are well below the rest. So you could describe the overall state of customer experience as being, I think, mediocre, right, if we just look at where those red boxes are. Now, the other thing I'd have you look at is just look at the ranges, right, of the industries. Just about every industry, I would say every industry overlaps with many, many, many other industries. And what's really cool about doing a multi-industry study like this is that companies can't say, well, you know, we can't have a great customer experience like that industry. But if you look at it, in fact, you can, because almost every industry overlaps every other industry. So it is very possible to have experiences that match companies in other industries. And so when you look at this, what I see is a lot of opportunity, right? Industries at the bottom have a lot to learn and can mimic a lot of industries that are above them. And I think a lot of the companies that are below average, below that red box, can learn from a lot of the companies, even in their industries, that are to the right, more towards the leading companies. So who are those leading companies and who are those lagging companies? Here are the top and bottom companies in the ratings. Remember, we have 318 of them, so we're really only showing you the top of the range and the bottom of the range. At the top of the scores are, and I'll name them out because they deserve to be named: Wegmans, H-E-B, Citizens Bank, a credit union. And I'll mention a credit union. When we say a credit union, we're talking about generically credit unions. So in our study, we actually have two named credit unions, USAA and Navy Federal Credit Union, and we give the opportunity to say credit unions other than USAA and Navy Federal Credit Union. So a credit union represents a class of credit unions. We have credit union, Publix, Subway, USAA, Ace Hardware, Dollar Tree, Aldi, and Wawa Food Markets. So let's give them a round of applause, a silent round of applause. Nice job. Same thing to all of the rest of the companies on the left-hand side of this chart. Now, on the right-hand side of this chart, we are not going to clap for CarMax, Spirit Airlines, Optimum, Medicaid, Comcast, Hitachi, Cox Communications, Charter Spectrum, and Dollar Rent-A-Car. Those are companies, and all the companies on the right, that deserve less than our applause. Now, as you look at this list, you'll notice a few things that happen, right? On the left-hand side, lots of supermarkets. And if you remember back to our industry chart, you'll remember that supermarkets were well above, on average, the other industries. And it turns out that supermarkets dominate a lot of the top end of the ratings. And people always ask, why is that? And I think that it's a couple of reasons. One is, I would say that supermarkets have a fairly basic interaction with customers, right? It's well understood. In most cases, customers want to come to a market, find the groceries that they want to have, and check out. So it's not a complex interaction. It's a well understood interaction. And quite frankly, the needs of customers when it comes to their supermarket experience haven't changed that dramatically over the last 5, 10, or 20 years. Now, some technology have changed components inside of it, but the basic interaction hasn't changed. And during that time, I think many supermarkets, and clearly the ones at the top of the list there, Wegmans, H-E-B, Publix, have done a really good job of understanding the needs of consumers for those experiences and have invested in improving both their company culture and the design of those interactions to deliver good experiences. Now, at the bottom, it's interesting that in any given year we'll have different industries dominating the bottom. We really, at the bottom, towards the bottom, we do have a lot of TV and internet service providers. And you'll remember that when on the previous chart, TV and internet service providers, along with health plans, dominated the bottom of the list. I think TV and internet service providers are a frustrating bunch for me to talk about because I think that they have, for years, been at the bottom of the list. Remember, we've been doing this for 8 years. And I think that they suffer from having a history of being sort of mini monopolies, right? They broke apart the country, and they were oftentimes the only players in town. And I think a lot of their mentality and operating processes grew out of that. Now, we see fits and starts from TV and internet service providers hiring customer experience people, talking about customer experience. but they haven't made a particularly strong improvement, and I think that most of them really need to push it to the next level if they're really going to get out of the doldrums and out of the basement in our ratings. So those are the top and the bottom companies in our ratings. Now, I also want to give a shout out to the top and the bottom of the industries, because even in some industries that aren't particularly strong, like health plans, TV and internet service providers, utilities, and health plans, there are companies that stick out, that jump out. So shout out to Southwest Airlines, Toyota, Citizens Bank and Credit Unions, Amazon, Subway, TRICARE, Holiday Inn Express and Marriott, USAA, Fidelity Investments, FedEx and UPS, National Car Rental, Ace Hardware and Dollar Tree, Apple, Amazon Prime, Wegmans, Whirlpool, Dish Network, Florida Power and Light, and Georgia Power, and Metro PCS. As I mentioned, not all of those names are household names when you think about customer experience, but in some of their industries, those brands, those companies are outperforming their peers. I won't talk about the ones on the right that are at the bottom of the list. I'll leave those for you to actually read on your own. Now, one of the things that we do, because remember our ratings, the reason we have our ratings is because we want to shine a light on customer experience. We want to shine a light on what's good, on what's bad. We want to shine a light on what's improving and what's not improving, basically because it gives us the opportunity to really make sure that people understand what customer experience is, and they have a metric, an open metric that they can track and use. And when I say an open metric, we encourage companies to actually use the same questions, the same measurements, the same metrics. We don't require any licensing fee for that. You can go ahead and use the questions. And what's great about it is we provide access to all of our company's results for free. And we'll talk about how you get access to that towards the end of this presentation. But one of the things we want to do, since we're shining a light on customer experience, is allow those companies that are doing a good job to be able to be recognized and showcase their success. So we've created badges for the top 10% of the companies in the ratings, and we've also created badge for the industry leaders. So hopefully the companies that are doing well can be proud of what they're doing and showcase that they are really doing a particularly good job in customer experience using those badges. Okay, so now we've talked mostly so far around this year's results. I want to talk about the results over the last few years. And rather than going over all 8 years, and we'll be doing more, I'll be publishing on my blog more detailed looks at sort of a longer period than just 3 years. But for our reports and for the stuff that we publish around the time we publish the experience ratings, we generally just keep looking at 3 years. So this is what the last 3 years looks like. And it's interesting because 2016 happened to be a year. If we look at sort of the move from 2015 to 2016, 2016 was a horrible year for the ratings. The companies really regressed, and I think that there was a lot of negative attitudes in the ratings. And one of the things I'll mention that we notice in the ratings is that the experience ratings oftentimes are influenced by lots of things, certainly consumer expectations, but also consumer sentiment. So if you have years where there's a lot of negative consumer sentiment, then that actually comes through in terms of really lowering the Temkin Experience Ratings. And 2016 was one of those years. So the move from 2016 to 2017 represented almost, you can see there were dramatic improvements, almost a return to the norm, as whatever headache and hungoverness there was in 2016 ended up improving in 2017. And then in 2018, we had a little bit of a regression in the ratings. So the experience dropped, especially if you look at the top two. One of the ways to look at sort of where the experience is going is look at the good and excellent, which is the top two. So in 2016, that totaled 20%. In 2017, that was about 51%. In 2018, it's that 38 plus 6%, which is 44%. Now, you might be asking, well, why isn't customer experience just getting better overall and getting better all the time? We're talking about it a lot. And the reason is, as I mentioned, one of the inputs is just overall consumer sentiment. But there are other aspects of this that's really important, which is that consumers are getting much, much more aware of the experiences that they have. So years ago, it used to be that if you happen to be, let's pick on the TV and internet service providers. If the experience you had with the TV and internet service provider was bad, but you just thought they all were bad, then your expectations weren't that high, and you'd probably score fairly well with very mediocre experience. But consumers are becoming more aware of their own experiences to begin with, and instead of comparing their experience with you for what you're giving them and what they might see across another industry, they're comparing your experience against what the best experience they have in any industry. And it's interesting, this is also going into B2B markets, right? That customers, B2B customers, so business customers, expect their business providers to treat them as well as the best consumer experience they have. So what you're seeing is this rise, this really dramatic rise in expectations about what consumers want to get from their providers. And so when the reason, I think a big reason why you just don't see customer experience growing up is not the fact that companies aren't looking at it, because I'm not going to share data in here, but we find that, we recently did research on large companies, and over half of large companies have a goal to be the best at customer experience in their industry in 3 years. So there's a lot of ambition, a lot of focus in large companies to improve customer experience, but what we're seeing here is that desire and that ambition is not keeping up to the rising expectations of consumers and customers in general around customer experience. So that creates what I would call a huge opportunity gap, right? If consumers are becoming more and more interested and aware of customer experience, and companies by and large aren't keeping up with that need, then that provides huge opportunities for companies that it can accelerate their customer experience efforts and fill that void, the gap between expectations and deliverables in their industries, and can capture a lot of the benefit, the ROI benefit for customer experience. And if you want to look at ROI data, we have a lot of it on our blog. I'm not going to go over it now, but suffice to say that our data shows that when consumers have a better experience, when companies do a better job of matching their expectations, they end up being much more loyal across a number of different dimensions. So let's look at how the scores have changed over the last few industries. Over the last year. And what you see here is what I'm showing you here is the 20 industries, and then the percentages that are on the bars, those represent the 2018 data. So supermarkets this year were at 78.5%. The next one down, fast food, 76.1%, all the way down to the bottom where TV and internet service providers are 54% this year. Now, the numbers in the column on the right, that represent the percentage point changes between 2017 and 2018. And what you can pick up here is that the largest improvements, there were just one industry that improved by 1 percentage point, two industries that improved by 1 percentage point or more. At the top of the list, streaming media improved the most. They went up 1.2 percentage points, and banks went up 1.1 percentage points. Now, on the other side, there were more industries that dropped this year. The two highest actually dropped more than 2.5 points. Auto dealers dropped down 2.9 percentage points, and utilities dropped 2.7 percentage points. So this gives you a sense of what industries are going and where they're coming. Now, if you have any interest in a particular industry and maybe what that industry has been doing for more than a year, you absolutely have to go to my blog, experiencematters.blog, or the CX blog, either one of those .com, either one of those will get you there, and we'll show you links at the end. Because what we've done is actually published snapshots for each one of these industries. So every industry up here, all 20 of them, have a snapshot on the blog that looks at not only this year, but what their results have been over the entire history of that industry in the Temkin Experience Ratings. So when we look at individual companies' changes over the last year, we have to give a shout out to a bunch of them. So on the left-hand table are the companies that have improved the most over the last year. 3 companies jump to the top because they've had double-digit improvements: Airbnb, Metro PCS, Avis. So let's give them our sort of virtual round of applause for everyone on the left. The companies on the right, we will not mention them by name, but those are the firms that actually dropped. And you can see that we have several that had double-digit drops over the previous year. Okay, hopefully you now have an understanding of what the Temkin ratings are, how they're calculated, and what the results look like for 2018. Now I want to share with you some resources that I've sort of mentioned in a little bit in terms of where you can get more information. On the left-hand side, you can see that we publish a free report, the Temkin Experience Ratings. For the entirety of our 8 years of doing this, we publish a free report. And you can get that free report at my blog, which is experiencematters.blog. You can get it at the Temkin Group site in the research area, so temkingroup.com, or cxratings.com brings you right to the blog post that has the report. So if you can't find it, it means that you're not looking for it. It's a free report. Download it for free. It has a lot of the data we're talking about. It doesn't list all of the companies, but it lists the gainers and losers and a lot more data than even what we've shown in this presentation. Now, if you're wondering, okay, where can I see all of the companies? We'll go to temkinratings.com. So for temkinratings.com, for every year, for all of our ratings, we have a table that you can sort by company, by industry, by rank, by Temkin Experience Ratings, by company versus industry average, and you can look at all of the companies. And if you want to search directly for a company, you can do it in there. And I should have mentioned that on the left-hand side, if you go to any one of those places, the Experience Matters blog, the Temkin Group, the cxratings.com, any of the places where you can download the report, we also have a link to a graphic that you can download that has all of the companies. So we have all of these free resources. There's no reason for you to wonder what's going on with Temkin Experience Ratings. How is the company doing? How's my company doing? How's the company doing that I care about? You get access to all of that for free. Now, if you want to get deeper data set, if you want to have the underlying success, effort, and emotion components, if you want to have a spreadsheet that you can sort and play with, well, you do have to purchase the data set. And from all of those places, you can purchase the data set. But it's certainly not required to get a handle on all of the Temkin Experience Ratings. All right, so we have gone through that quickly and probably raised a whole bunch of questions. It usually does. So I want to actually give you answers to what are really common questions that we have. So I'll go through this question by question and give you sort of an answer to these common questions. First, how much does it cost to participate? The answer is nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. We do not collect fees, solicit fees for anyone in the ratings, for anyone not in the ratings. We don't use it to solicit fees in any way Our goal in creating the Temkin Experience Ratings is really to have an open customer experience index that companies can use and that companies can benchmark themselves, and we make all of the results freely open to anyone who just wants to go and see the data. Second question, how do you select the industries? We've been doing this for, like I said, for 8 years, and we've evolved the industries, so every couple years we make changes. I think last year we made a change to combine TV and internet service together and to add streaming media. We don't make a lot of changes year over year in the industry, and that's because we want the industries to be, they're not all, obviously in 20 industries we're not going to cover every industry that's out there, but we want them to be reflective of sort of the state of customer experience in the U.S. market. And our choice of industries are based on, we have to have industries that we can actually monitor. So they have to have, the industry has to have several brands that are national brands where we can get many companies to evaluate. And so I'll give you a hint that one of the industries I'd love to be able to look at are the healthcare providers, hospitals and the, but unfortunately they don't really have a profile that match our needs. There aren't many national branded healthcare providers, but we're still looking at that market amongst other markets that we continue to look at to be included. The next question is, how can we get our company included or excluded? We get that question a lot. The included ones is, oh, we want to be listed on there, or we want to be able to compare our company to the others. We're in that industry. In most cases, there's really not an opportunity for you to get included or excluded. We don't look for submissions, and as I mentioned earlier, there's no way to pay your way in. If you believe that your company should be on the list because your market share is larger than some of the other industries, remember, we would admit this is an imperfect science, the picking of the companies and industries. So what we ask you to do is submit market share data, hard data that suggests that your footprint, your national footprint, is bigger than some of the other companies we have on the list, and we'll certainly consider it. In terms of excluded, there is really no option. You may not like where you fall, and this is where it usually happens. Companies don't like where they fall on the list and ask us to remove their company. There's no possible way. We don't ask you to be included. We don't allow you to be excluded. We don't require any participation by the companies on the list, nor do we look for any. The next question, why don't you weight the components, success, effort, and emotion? People ask, well, isn't success more important? Isn't emotion more important? And while I think it would be perfectly fair for a company to weight the index for their own needs, remember we're doing a benchmark that crosses over 20 industries. So if we started to weigh the components, we'd run into problems that maybe the weighting doesn't make sense in one industry for another, and really all three components are important. And what we find is the consumers end up really sort of gravitating towards the companies that have the best experience across all three of those. So we've decided not to weight the components. Like I said, if you wanted to weight your individual companies, I wouldn't have a strong feeling against that if you had some rationale for it. The next question is, we're a health plan. Should we really worry about emotion? I'm picking on health plans. This could be any industry that asks this type of question or any company. And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely you have to worry about emotion. This doesn't mean that, and I want to make it clear, worrying about emotion doesn't mean that every time you have an interaction with a customer, the goal is to make them giddy, right? But even health plans have to really worry about how do we make sure we're not delivering really strong negative emotions. One of the things, especially with health plans, is the design of the no experience, right? And we all know that lots of our companies, and especially health plans, have to have interactions where they have to say no to their customers or their members, whatever you want to call them. And so if a customer calls up and it's asking about a procedure that they are hoping will be covered by the health plan, a medical procedure, there are some times you're going to have to say no, but there are different ways to say no. And you can deliver a no experience that has a really strong negative emotional response, or you can deliver a no experience that has a neutral, maybe even a positive emotional response. So yes, you have to care about emotion. Yes, you have to focus on it. But like I said, that doesn't always mean that that you're reaching for a giddy, positive emotional response. Sometimes it's just, how do we make sure that we don't have a strong negative emotional response? The next question is, isn't it unfair to rate our company with retailers and supermarkets and fast food since our interactions are more complicated? No, it isn't unfair. It would be unfair to set some expectation that you had to match the best of the best in another industry, but I think comparing industries, and I showed you before, industries overlap lots of other industries. And if you're not looking at industries that do a better job than your industry, then all you are doing is ensuring that that you are at best going to be mediocre like the rest of your industry. So our belief is that the most positive thing we can do for any industry, even if you're a lagging industry, is compare you against other industries and have you find those sort of experiences that are closest to yours across the industry, and instead of trying to be equivalent to mediocre companies delivering customer experience in your industry, reach for case studies and reach for equivalent experiences in other industries that you can replicate and learn from. Next one is, why do TV service providers, internet service providers, and health plans get such low ratings? And I will give you two reasons. One is, I'll give a shout out. They have very complicated interactions, right? In TV and internet service providers, there's a lot of technology that can go right or wrong, right? That's in those industries. In health plans, right? You have deep emotional responses that have complications, and I would say that for all those industries, they've created a lot of the complications. And in reality, when you create complexity, it is really hard to deliver a consistently good customer experience. So if you want to deliver a good customer experience, you have to remove complexity from the beginning, right? But also, I would say for those industries, they've lived in what I would call as being monopolistic environments. For TV and internet service providers, monopolies were driven by regional control. For health plans, they've lived in a world where owning an employer, where many of employees chose from a very few set of health plans that their employer gave, that they created employer monopolies, right? Monopolies in those environments. And so the companies have a lot of those companies have evolved in a world where they didn't have to compete directly for the loyalty of end customers. It sort of was given to them, and they sort of had control of the environment. That's changing. And so I think that you're going to see, if I think over the next 5 or 10 years, those industries are changing rapidly with external competition, and with health plans, I think with changes in regulations and change in laws, that's going to require even more competition. Then the last question I'll put on the list, how can I get data from previous years? Go to cxratings.com. All those places that I've been leading you to have links to previous years. You can download the reports for free from previous years. You can go to the Temkin Ratings website and look at data on those sortable tables from previous years. All of that is easily available. So hopefully I've given you a sense of the Temkin Ratings. I've given you a sense of what they are, what they're not, and made the case that if you're interested, we have a lot of free resources. So let me end it here. Once again, Bruce Temkin. That's the blog, either experiencematters.blog or the cxblog.com. That's my email address. You can see me on Twitter @btemkin. We're easy to find. You can Google Temkin Group. You can Google my name. You can Google Temkin Experience Ratings or go to temkinratings.com and get all of this information. But hopefully you found this useful. But more importantly, I hope that you can use the Temkin ratings to make the case and in your organization around customer experience and to see where companies are, because we really invest a lot of resources in making this openly available customer experience benchmark available to everyone, and hope you take you take advantage of the data and of the reports. Thank you once again for joining us and for your interest in the Temkin Experience